who forwards her research interests through community engagements and participatory historical geography. For over a decade, she has undertaken scholarly research on how neon signs have transformed the American landscape and, as part of that work, has served on the board of the American Sign Museum and serves as secretary of the board of the Museum of Neon Art. Her collaborative research with Paul Greenstein revealed that the Los Angeles sign, widely heralded as the first neon sign in the US, was in fact not the first. Their most recent collaborative effort is the richly illustrated book, Neon, A Light History. And her partner, Paul, who you will see tonight, has been one of the most influential Los Angeles neon sign designers and restorers of the past 40 years, helping keep neon in the public eye and preserving neon's history for our future. Paul Greenstein began in 1977, a time when neon signs were nearly extinct, by designing, building, and installing the then revolutionary neon, cast resin, and plastic guitar sign for Granny's, a rock and roll tailor on West Hollywood Sunset Strip, leading to other bespoke neon signs for businesses on what would become the very trendy Melrose Avenue. But even as Greenstein designed, engineered, and crafted iconic new signs for new businesses, he has always also been a leader in sign restoration, restoring signs like Hollywood's 1930 Castle Argyle sign, Westlake Park's 1928 Hotel Californian sign, and Echo Park's 1924 Jensen's Recreation Center. Devoted to the art and craft of neon, as well as to its potential for community beautification and invigoration, Greenstein uses his neon skills to serve the greater Los Angeles community. He's the co-author, together with Dydia DeLyser, of Neon, A Light History. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the stage over to Dydia and Paul, and I'm looking forward to their presentation.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks everyone for coming. Let's just do a quick sound check. You guys can hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear fine.
Howdy, fellow travelers.
So thank you so much for having us. We're really thrilled to be here. We're members of the SCA, supporters and admirers of the work that the association has done over so many years in roadside archaeology and in preserving neon's history and its future. I want to thank our funders, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Anders Foundation, and also acknowledge that our book, which is part of what we're going to be talking about tonight, benefits the Museum of Neon Art. Also, deep thanks to our collaborators in design and publishing, who you probably know, Randall Ann Homan and Al Barna from SF Neon, the organizers of Neon Speaks, and the creators of Giant Orange Press, who published the book. Collaborating with them has been an incredible experience, and it was really our goal to make Neon, A Light History, a book that was not just about neon, but that it came from the neon community. So what we've done is we fuse our different ways of thinking and our different kinds of expertise. We not only have different expertise that we merge, but we're also married. So in order to keep the household calm, we've also divided up the presentation tonight. So we'll see how that goes. What we're going to do, I'm going to share my screen. We'll have portions that are slides, and then at the end, Paul's going to do, as you'll see, a demonstration, a little bit of mad scientist action, I think. So then we won't be sharing our screen anymore. So you'll be looking at us in the tiny little window for a bit. So that's the cover of our book, Neon, A Light History. And we're going to talk about that. I'll begin. And what I'm going to talk about very quickly is 8 ways that you may not have thought about neon before. We're aware that you guys are an expert insider audience. And we've really tried in our book to think neon differently through our research and through the way that we do our work. So I'll hit those few things that we're going to go on, and Paul will talk about neon sign restoration and what it really takes to do that after these signs have been outside for 95 years. And then he'll do a demonstration of some neon artifacts that he's unearthed and a little bit of mad scientist stuff. So I'll move on quickly to get to Paul's stuff. The first thing is the most important thing, and it's one that you already know. Neon signs create community. They draw us, they work geographically, they draw us together underneath their light. They always have done so. They do that for individuals, they do that for couples on a honeymoon, right? What were they doing in those cottages? And they do that for groups like, shout out to Robert Gell and Route 66 Association of Missouri and all the other Route 66 associations for all the work that you've done to preserve Americans' neon landscapes and neon heritage. We come together in groups and as individuals to save neon signs. Neon signs connect us and create our community. I'll talk briefly about the inventors of neon. You may have heard that this guy, George Claude, is the inventor of neon, but he's not. What he did was develop a way to extract oxygen from ordinary air. He was working on making explosives, and neon was a byproduct of the extraction of oxygen. He then used neon in this beautiful lighting of the cathedral at Rouen in 1910. He used neon in someone else's tubing that they had already invented and realized that neon could work for something, then patented electrodes and other technological devices, franchised companies, and made a significant profit from neon, but he did not invent it. It's difficult to say who did, but if you pinned it to anybody, it would be Daniel McFarland Moore, and not in 1910 when George Claude was first working on it, but in the mid 1890s, quite a bit earlier, in the very early days, really, for commercial electricity. He made both signs spelling words in luminous tubing, and he made lit rooms like this one. And it was before neon had been separated from air, so he filled his tubing with either ordinary air or carbon dioxide, which was really complicated, but it made for white light, which was revolutionary at the time when bulbs were very red and dim. As Brian mentioned earlier, and thank you for the lovely introduction, you may have heard this story before, a myth that has spread in the neon community, one that we had heard for many years ourselves, about this Packard sign, once in a different location than this, as the first neon sign in America. So we sought out to find pictures of it, and lo and behold, using air photos, sequential air photos, building permits, and the original scrapbooks of the Earl C. Anthony Packard Company, we found it. That's the sign in the downtown Los Angeles landscape, but it was too late to be first. There were already other signs in New York at that time and possibly even in Los Angeles. It's difficult to see it from this air photo, but you can recognize it a little bit if you look at what Earl C. Anthony was doing in other advertising. The Packard logo in neon, suspended between radio masts on wires or lightning bolts. Anthony had a big radio station. So you can sort of see in this picture a radio mast and the lightning bolts and the Packard sign. So that was the sign. The sign did exist, but too late to be first. And we're happy to talk more about that. Colors, a lot of people don't think about that because we think of neon in the rainbow of colors that we're so accustomed to, but early neon signs were almost exclusively red and blue, and more red than blue. So if you think of the 1920s, the lit landscape in American cities was red and blue and more red. A really different landscape from the one that we know today. The neon colors that we know today came about later, not until the late 1930s in the United States, when people started using colored glass to make different colors, and also phosphor coatings on the inside of the tubing that would light up in all kinds of different colors. We'll show you some of those examples a little bit later. The holy grail of all those colors, white. Still white from Daniel McFarland Moore in the 1890s was achieved in December 1938 at Los Angeles's Earl Carroll Theater, both inside and out. So that's really when neon developed the colors we know today. Neon's geography This group will be really familiar with neon reaching out along highways and roadsides, right? We know that part of the geography really well, but let's think about it a little bit. Neon signs, the commercial neon signs we're familiar with now began to spread in this country in the mid and late 1920s. That means that they were coincident with the rise of affordable and reliable automobiles and the expansion of the road and paved highway network across the country. So neon signs and automobiles were catalytic to transform the American landscape into one that developed within 4 cars. So we're talking about something really different from like Europe, right? With beautiful neon lit gas stations and magnificent neon hamburger stands where you drove up and you went to them in your car, or neighborhoods like Westwood, which was developed off the main drag, but with neon lit towers on its buildings to draw you from the arterial road into the neighborhood. So neon evolved to draw us to our neighborhoods, to lure us along our highways and then off the highways into our highway businesses. So neon signs attract. Government support is something we don't think of around a lot of private industry, but neon has flourished because of different kinds of government support. So first, in 1933, well, this is already the depths of the Depression when repeal ended national prohibition on alcohol. By 1934, neon shops were doing a booming business selling beer signs because anybody who was selling beer wanted you to know it, and they were advertising it in neon. Even neon schools were training more and more people just to be bending the letters beer because those were what was needed in such large numbers. As we moved further through the Depression, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal included programs for storefront modernization, where you could get grants and loans from the government to upgrade or modernize your storefront to one that often included neon. So stores, even in small towns across the country, would go from a 19th century sort of cow town look to a very modern, streamlined look using neon. Suddenly, small towns across the country could be competing for looks with their cosmopolitan big city cousins. Then in the war, FDR signed the GI Bill. We often think of that now as college for veterans, but it also always has been significantly for vocational schools, and neon schools were part of that. So here's a group of young men returned from the war, still wearing their military jackets, some of them, at a neon school in Lima, Ohio. They could learn the trade at a neon school and then set up a mom and pop shop and raise their family on the neon trade. So by the post-war period, mom and pop shops were popping up everywhere across the country. And the neon trade really developed, even from the beginning, some large shops, but mostly really small, locally engaged mom and pop shops. Landscape morality set in by the 1950s and 60s, a morality against clutter, a morality in favor of planning and design and against the random accumulation of different layers and different kinds of signs, and eventually a morality against neon, a morality that linked neon with bad virtues and bad morals, like, well, I said beer, drinking, seedy motels, gambling and sex work were all linked with neon in a negative way. But also the sign industry themselves participated. And in the mid-1960s, they engaged in a campaign called Scrap Old Signs, where nationwide sign shops would organize days or weeks where they would simply take down both working and orphaned signs all across the country, removing tens of thousands of signs and a huge percentage of our country's neon and lit sign heritage. So pillaging their own heritage. Longevity, my last point. This sign on the left, the Acme beer sign, is one of those beer signs. It's Paul's, and it's one of those 1934 beer signs. It still works. It's the original glass, the original gas inside the glass, and the original transformer. It's been running since 1934. The signs on Felipe's restaurant in Chinatown in Los Angeles, they have, I think, 6 signs total. 4, 5, something like that, 5 signs total. The oldest, Paul works on those signs. The oldest one of those is from about 1926. That means that sign has been working outdoors at night, in the rain, in the cold, in the heat for 95 years. Neon's longevity is something that no one can even predict. It has already lasted much longer than Daniel McFarland Moore or George Claude could have ever imagined, and nobody knows how long it will continue to glow. The gas inside the tubes can do its thing indefinitely. So we're looking at a technology with tremendous longevity, and it's one reason why it sparkles into our lives. Turning it over to you,
Okay.
Restoration Man.
Restoration Man. I'm going to talk about a couple of signs I've done in the not too distant past. I've been doing, as mentioned earlier, I've been doing neon signs since 1977. I did my first restoration for a drugstore in Hollywood in 1979. Unfortunately, that sign attracted so much attention that they demolished the building, but that's another story. This is for the Hotel Californian, which was on 6th and Bonnie Bray in Los Angeles. They had 2 signs that they installed somewhere around 1926. Building was built in 24, and they started off with a light bulb sign, but they wanted something a little more modern, so they had these installed. This picture shows it in storage from the city. The city took it down when the building burned in about 1994, and they put it in a lot. This picture was probably taken 20 plus years ago, because when I finally got to the sign, the one on the right had been kicked over and stepped on and destroyed. The one on the left had gone to a well-known actress who took it apart, reconfigured it, put it in her backyard, then sold the house, so it's disappeared. You can go to the next one. This is giving you an idea what kind of shape the sign was in. You see on the right, that little piece of lace is actually the bottom of the O, the metal. So this thing was pretty rotten because it had been in contact with the ground, and the lower parts were just rotted out. Go back. You're
Sorry.
too excited.
Trigger happy.
Trigger happy. You notice on the top of the O, the 2 white circles. We'll get to those in a minute, but just pay attention to them. Next. This is the sign when we were completing it. I managed to find traces of the original orange paint and kind of cream colored paint. It's a creamsicle.
Yeah.
So we put it back up on the roof with special dispensation from the city, because rooftop signs are now illegal in Los Angeles. On the bottom right is what it looks like lit. Unfortunately, you can lead a horse to water, can't make them think. They no longer turn it on because they think it's expensive. So, okay. Next, this is the Castle Argyle. I'm actually doing the one on the left is the rooftop sign. And if you look really careful on the bottom right, you'll see there's an entrance, and at the top of the entrance is another sign, and that's one
in the circle. If you can see the circle, depending on how you have your little Zoom windows laid out.
I'm working on that one currently. This sign originally was, as you see, green with silver pinstripe, single line neon. Was turned off during World War II, turned back on. The freeway comes right next to it, so the new owners thought, let's get something a little more kick. So they double lined it in white. They essentially made it 3 times, 4 times as bright so people could see it when they drove by on the freeway. I returned it back to the original configuration, which is what you're looking at on the left. Now we can go to the next one. This is the entrance for the Castle Argyle. You can see what I had to work with when I started. Interestingly, this is ripple tin, which was a real popular thing in the 20s and 30s. You'll see that the CAST was pretty butchered. Someone had worked on this sign, smashed it, cut it up. You'll see in one of the other pictures, we can go forward. You see they screwed it back together with wood. Always a good idea. Wood, metal, grain. What could go wrong? Electricity. I don't understand. Here, go back. And I found, well, actually Todd Swarmstead, who is American Sign Museum, pointed me towards a company that had a press to make ripple tin still. Took about 6 months to get one sheet done, but I did get it done. Now we can go ahead. Next. Those are the letters from Castle Argyll. When I had the thing paint stripped, I'm kind of showing all the pitfalls in restoration, I guess. 90-year-old solder just turns to powder and all these letters fell apart. So they all had to be resoldered, re-glued, re-this, re-that. Next. Here's the new ripple tin. So we put a new ripple tin face on all the severely damaged parts. Go ahead.
And you can see all the ripple tin or crimp metal. It's just finely corrugated, which increases the strength of the metal.
But it's also, it's on a metal called galvanneal. So it's galvanized and annealed. So it's really soft. You can work on it. So you can bend the edges over. You can see this is what we've done in this picture. We've bent the edges over and then we spot weld them like the original and soldered the seams like original. So.
And because the new ripple tin was made on the original machine at FlexLoom, it's identical to the original.
You can see the old piece in the back laying against another sheet of ripple tin. Next. Here we are putting it back together. Next. That's what it looked like when it was painted. So now what's happened is I found traces of the original blue, which is kind of a midnight blue, and I kind of fabulated the silver because I thought silver and blue, that's a real kind of Art Deco look. And I've re-drilled the holes and it's ready to get the glass. And there it is with the glass.
Hasn't been installed yet. That's the final phase.
I'm still waiting to get the phone call to install this. So this is currently sleeping peacefully in the backyard.
I think that's your last slide of those.
That's my last slide of that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
so now the demonstration part, I'll stop the screen share.
Yeah, what I know.
And
some of the people in the audience, this is going to be old hat. And to those people, I kind of apologize. You know, you've seen it before. I've seen it before. A lot of people have asked me, you know, how does this stuff work? So I've brought a bunch of pieces, new and old. This is insulator housing. You can see inside. Yeah, you can kind of see it. There is a spring.
If you turn if you're not on speaker view, if you click on the view button at the top of your screen and click on speaker view, then we'll become larger so that you can see what Paul is sharing.
Okay, and we have the housing. We have a piece of glass, goes inside, fits against a spring, and that what makes the contact.
That's modern.
This is modern. I'm going to give this a little juice so you can see how it works.
So he's hitting the bottom of the insulator and that connects, the electricity connects into the tube and it lit the tube.
Under the theory of if you hit something with enough electricity, it will light on fire, and that includes us. Here's another thing. Now, the most important part of a neon sign, because you can't patent air and you can't really patent glass, and glass tubing has been around forever. So the most important part, and this was the basis of all the patent wars, is this little piece of metal called the electrode. Let's light this one up.
Yeah, they can't see the, there you go.
So with that in mind, keep the idea on the size of this, and we're going to go to an old electrode. This is an original Claude neon electrode from about 1926, and it's pretty dirty, so it's hard to see, but you see the difference in size. So what Claude did is he invented a working electrode, because they had problems with what they called sputtering. So you would hit the electrode with the electricity, and it would just kind of go blah, 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 and it wouldn't really work. So this is, once again, a 95-year-old electrode. And as long as we're doing that, we're going to get to some old style electrode housings. Before they used glass, like this one, they used porcelain. This one was actually made by the Coors Company, the same people that make beer, in a different factory in Inglewood, California, and it is porcelain.
And it was one way that they got through Prohibition, was instead of making.
Diversify.
Yeah, they made
Here-
porcelain housing.
Here's another one. This one is actually from the Castle Argyle sign. This is one of the ones I managed to salvage. What happens, and you'll see in a second, is that over the years, people no longer wanted to use these things because they're kind of a pain in the ass to use. You had to screw it in here, you had to reach them behind there, and there's a little thumb screw and the wire goes there, and everyone went, yeah, why are we doing that when we can just do this? So what they would do was smash them.
To remove.
Oh, wait, here's another smashed one. Why do I keep all these smashed ones? Yeah, who knows? Prior to having a capped housing, the really old signs, and a lot of this is going to, the reason I'm telling you people a lot of this stuff is when you see a sign of this vintage, you'll kind of know what you're talking about. This is the original type of insulator used on a neon sign. You can see the two screw holes that would screw it into the front, or actually through the back of the sign. Goes through like that, insulates against the metal there. And then they had a little thing called a Fonstock clip, which is still made today, but not for this use. And you would clip it on there. So it was a very, very good connection. If there was rain, the water would come through and just drip down into the bottom of the can. It worked really, really well, but it was a pain in the butt. So they stopped doing it. Moving on with some more technological things. This is called a McMahon tube support, and the glass fits on this tube support and is held on with a piece of copper wire. A lot of you have seen that. Here is a modern McMahon tube support. And once again, this one is probably 90 years old. It's actually purpled, which is kind of hard to see. But prior to that, they used to make their own tube supports. They call it elephant trunks because it looks like my nose. Or maybe not. Where were we? I got distracted. So if you see a McMahon tube support, they were invented in about 1927. So anything that has this type, the homemade, the shop-made ones, is probably pre-1927. Along with, here's another little cute thing. Electrical Products Corp. Can you imagine today a sign company making stamped plates to show their wares?
And they also, they mandated what color those would be painted. They were all painted in a uniform color at every shop around the country.
Here's another old electrode compared to a new one. And once again, the thing that everybody was battling about was not neon, not glass, but the electrodes and the connections to make it all work. So we have collections of kind of funky old electrodes.
That all came off of signs that you worked on.
Yeah, these are all off of signs I work on because we like funky old things. Here's another one. This one, the glass is broken, but if you look at it, you can see it's a homemade electrode. The shop made them.
So there was, because George Claude held early patents for electrodes, people either had to buy a Claude Neon franchise,
Very
or
expensive.
which was very, very expensive, or they had to patent their own electrodes and work around the patents. So there are lots in the early days before the patents expired in 32, there are lots of really unusual electrodes that came out in attempt to work around the patents.
Okay, we're almost out of time. I've been kind of rushing through this pretty quickly. And just as a little bonus, I'm going to light up some tubing. This one is red.
So this is it phosphor coated or just red
No, this
tubing?
is
It's just
red
ruby
tubing.
red.
Ruby red tubing.
Okay. And you already did neon in clear glass before.
Yeah, this one is green. Blue, cobalt blue. I don't know if the colors are coming through as badly for you guys. Well, here's kind of the gem of anyone's collection. This is uranium green.
Ooh.
If you really look at it, you can see that the outside is a different color than the inside. I can certainly see that here.
Yeah, it's pale. The glass itself is a pale green. It has a little bit of uranium oxide in it. And when it lights, it's filled with mercury argon. So it has a blue light across the center. And then you can see these sort of echoes of that green along the walls of the tubing. It's a really
And-
beautiful glass. It's not super, super bright. So though it was invented early on, it wasn't really widely used for signs. It was mostly used for like store window displays and interior displays in stores.
And this is today's quiz. I'm going to hit Dydia with this thing, and we're going to see what color she lights up.
Yeah, great
You guys have-
idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
what
guys-
are my fillings?
yeah. You guys have to take a poll. See what color you think.
A
Red,
Zoom
blue,
poll.
green,
A
yellow.
Zoom poll.
Yeah.
How about we just do the uranium glass again?
Oh, okay. Spoil sport.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, they're ending our quickie.
So thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Dydia and Paul. That was absolutely fascinating, just top notch. We have some questions that have come across the chat, so I'll just pose them now and then we'll open it up to the floor too. Jeremy Eversole has, excuse me, I've got a cold. He says, it feels like all the extant neon signs in Milwaukee advertise beer. Any comment on that?
There were a lot to start with. So the odds are, yeah, they would advertise beer.
Okay.
I have like a small Los Angeles beer sign collection from the 30s, and there are so many of them. It's
Oh, that's
crazy.
great.
They really sold a lot of beer. So that was
Yeah.
a question too about where is the Acme on Ice sign? It's in your
Yes.
workshop.
I actually have two of them.
Lucky you.
Don't tell anyone.
Lucky duck.
I went to this is back in the late 70s, early 80s. I went to this liquor store and they had over in a corner Acme beer. And I looked at it and I went, oh my God, that thing's from like 1934. What do you want to do with it? And they said, well, you want them both? And I went, okay, two of them.
It's
Great.
not that easy now. Neon
No.
signs are now highly collectible and they've become really expensive,
Yeah.
especially the historic ones. So we're very fortunate to have some.
Yeah.
Someone asked where you can get our book, Neon
Yeah.
Light History,
Just send money.
right here. You can go to our website, historyofneon.org. I typed it into the chat. It's also available, of course, in the Mona Bookstore, Museum of Neon Art. Because SF Neon was on hiatus temporarily, our Amazon store was on hold. So we're repopulating that now. But just go to historyofneon.org or go to the Museum of Neon Art, neonmona.org website, and you can get that.
Okay.
So it looks like Phil Langdon has a question about when did neon sign restoration? You're familiar with Let There Be Neon in New York City, which was Rudy Stern's shop, and he really put neon in a gallery in what was then an emergingly trendy neighborhood in New York City. And he also made signs. He made signs as art. He made signs new. And I believe he also began restoring signs at that time. That would have also been in the 70s.
I don't really know. I wouldn't claim to have invented the neon sign restoration because neon signs are always being restored / repaired. I was the first one I knew of who took a sign and ground up, start to finish, restored it. I don't think that was being done at that time.
So
So I take a little credit.
So, what we've seen is, so first you make a sign new and you just, and you put it up on the roof or on the front of the building, and you just, then it, at first it runs for a while, then it needs maintenance and repair. It'll need a new transformer, somebody breaks the glass, you repair it. That's normal for electrical and mechanical things. But then after a while, it needs to either be preserved. So many people have saved neon signs by taking them inside. Many collectors have saved our neon heritage by moving them inside so that they're not outside in the rain at night, and then their deterioration is effectively paused, right? But if you want to continue to operate it outside at night in the rain and the snow and the hail, just like the mailman, then who works in the day, but then you eventually need to restore the sign, because otherwise an electromechanical thing like that is not going to continue to operate. So then it needs to be brought back to a condition like when it was new. So new wiring, partly new metal, right? As we saw, sometimes new glass if it's broken.
One of the most important things is new paint, and not just new paint, but new good paint, because paint repels the water. So as an example, the one I did in 1979, I pulled it off the wall, which is illegal.
It's just not, you won't get it back up to, it's not permitted to put it back up.
Can't permit. So I took it and had it paint stripped, and one of the qualities of old paint is that it etches. So you could see on the metal, the pattern, the zigzag modern pattern of this one sign that said drugs. And so I repainted it the exact same color, the exact same patterns, changed drugs to cosmetics for the new owner, put it back up.
Which was only superficial in the glass. It didn't change the holes.
Yeah, I
in
didn't
the
make
sign.
any holes in the sign.
But the thing about the etching of the metal is really interesting, because many people now appreciate what we now call a patina or peeling paint, right? So they appreciate the age of paint. But most neon signs that are old have many, many layers of paint on them. So that paint that's peeling isn't in the original colors, and it doesn't represent what the sign looked like originally. So interestingly, if you strip that paint, then you can see the ghost of where things like the original pinstriping were. And you can also, if you strip it carefully, you can often get down to the original colors at the bottom.
Now, one of the things that people don't really know is that back in the old days, in the 20s and 30s and 40s and into the 50s, signs were not always purchased, they were leased. So if you had a bar and you wanted a sign that said beer, and you rented it from the company and you had it up there for 10 years and you decided to retire, they would take it back and they would say, now it's bar beer. And then that person would have it for 10 years, and then they'd say beer bar for 10 years. And now it's a 40-year-old sign that they just throw in their boneyard. I have a sign that I haven't started restoring yet, and it has at least 6 incarnations on it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I haven't decided where to stop.
How far back to go?
We have a great question here from Stephanie. How is the art of neon sign making and restoration being taught today? Are there schools that teach neon sign making?
That's a great question.
Not really. Neon sign, it's kind of a dead business. So there's no call for schools because there's not enough people that want to do it, because there's not enough customers.
Also, though in particular booming periods in the late 20s and early 30s, there were schools. And then with the early part of the GI Bill after the war, during and after, at the end of the war, there were schools. Neon more has been taught, it's a trade. So it's not usually learned in school. It's usually learned in, vocationally on the job, and an on the job training apprenticeship program. There are people who, like Dean Blazek in Antigo, Wisconsin, he's been teaching neon for, I'm sure it's at least 40 years, if not 50, still teaching neon. So you can apprentice and learn and be taught, but it's not the same thing as sitting in a classroom. There have been classrooms, and the Museum of Neon Art does offer introductory classes, but it takes years to become a skilled neon bender, to be able to shape the letters with accuracy and speed. So there aren't people who teach it at that high level in a school setting right now.
Yeah, because once again, there's not a lot of people who want to go into neon tube bending or neon sign making professionally. There's people who want to go, oh, I'd love to make my name and give it to my wife, or, you know, I make a picture of my dog or whatever, but that's not a living.
There's another thing though, which is interesting, that because of the early competition around the patents and the really almost hostile nature of the neon industry in the early days, once the patents were released in the early 30s, then anybody who'd learned to bend in a Claude Neon franchise shop could simply leave and start their own shop, right? And so there was a lot of hostility between shops, because you could just pillage somebody else's employees, or you could be trained by someone, be paid to be trained, and then leave and set up your own shop across the street and become their competitor. So that tradition continued for a long time. What we fortunately see right now are there are a number of really highly skilled benders in the country who are aware that their lifespan is finite and who want to pass on their significant skills. So these are people who've been bending for 40 years or more, who want to teach the high level skills to other people and who are sharing their art and their craft with others. That happens at a small scale, but that's partly because the demand for neon signs across the country is at a small scale right now. So it's up off the bottom.
Oh, that's great. We have a question, actually, a related one from Cindy Flora. Says, is there anyone apprenticing with you right now?
Oh, with me?
Yes.
Informally.
Yeah,
Andy does.
informally I do. I always have somebody that's working with me that I teach the stuff to. Whether they continue with it or not, that's another story.
Okay. We have a question here from Todd. Now, I think Todd is still online. Todd, would you like to unmute yourself and just ask the question? It's sort of technical and kind of involved. Are you there, Todd?
Oh, that is.
Yes, I am.
Okay, Todd, can you just pose the question yourself?
Sure. Hey, Paul and Dydia.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you about stuff that you've discovered in your restorations, specifically about tube length. And
Yes.
so, like right now in the shop, we have a Schaefer beer, probably from, the 30s, and it's 1 unit, 11 millimeter clear red. It's 18 feet of glass. It's incredible. Like, we wouldn't pump anything that big. And then in your book, you have, the Earl Carroll Theater with that Goddess of Light picture.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
So everyone can see it. It's a statue of a naked woman, slightly smaller than life size. And her body is wrapped in a neon tube, and that reaches past her hand and goes up toward the ceiling of the building. So
Yeah,
she
and
is
so
the goddess of light.
Yeah, I've looked at that picture and tried to blow it up to see where the
Well,
breaks are, and it doesn't look like it.
There is. It's a lie.
They say that there's no break. They
Yeah.
say it's 50 feet, one tube.
It took me
And
a
it's
while
large.
to find it.
It's large diameter too, and it's
Yeah.
probably single electrode. So it's really,
First off, it's 24 or 26 millimeter, which is really large.
Mhm.
Second off, it's done with mercury argon, which doesn't take as much power. And third, and most importantly, in her hand, her upstretched hand, is a connection. So it's
hidden, and she reaches out,
Yeah.
and there's a little metal piece. The statue still remains. The glass is long gone. But if you climb up and look into the palm of her hand, there's this little arc, and that's where the two tubes met, sort of in secret.
Yeah. So in the case of your
But that-
18,
but-
oh, go ahead.
But that's still 25 and
But
25.
the tube that goes up from her hand is probably still 20, 30 feet.
Yeah, it's 25.
And in that spectacular Los Angeles book, I think it is, they show, a movie premiere of Oklahoma, and there's two cutie pie women like standing by the sign. The letters look like they're probably 4 or 5 foot letters, double outline,
Mhm.
and it's 1 unit. Like, that M is 1 unit. It's a 4 foot letter, so it's probably 20 feet of glass in that letter. And I was
Well,
like,
As an example, when you're using the neon works kind of counterintuitively, because you think that the bigger the tube, the more power, and it's the other way around. The bigger the tube, the less power it requires. So a 24 millimeter tube could run 80 feet of glass on 15,000 volt transformer. a 11 millimeter tube in red, it's only about 20 feet. It will run one transformer will run 20 feet. That's it.
Yeah, with that big M, and maybe I could contact you guys privately.
Sure.
That would be
Yeah.
awesome. So I
Oh,
don't,
yeah.
but with that
Oh,
big
yeah.
M, you'd still have to evacuate it. You still have to bombard it. It's
Mhm.
going to be something to get that thing clean.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that
And
you
so
could
I was just
also,
wondering,
it's, you know, it's partly, when neon signs were ordinary and everywhere and the thing that every shop was doing, the everyday, every shop level of skill was very, very high. So you may have high skills, but they would be rare now, right? And doing something like this is extraordinary now. But because in those days, so many people had really high skills, these things that seemed to us extraordinary were more average. Still amazing, still awesome. They still had to be really good, but there were a lot of really good shops and a lot of really good vendors and processors.
Yeah.
So,
all right, well, thanks for
here's
letting me
your
take your
other,
time.
oh, thank
What
you.
model
And
Hu-
salvaged
what model
parts.
Hudson?
And salvaged parts. That's the guy, you get some antique stuff from Arizona, right?
Yeah, it's not the same one.
Oh, no, but he
Yeah,
asked.
don't give away your
Oh.
secrets.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
There's a shop. There's a shop in there.
Yeah, there's a parts house. Someone's asking about what year model is your Hudson. I've got 249s, a 37.
But the one in the picture was Fred's.
No,
No,
that
we
was
didn't have a,
Pontiac.
oh, that was, yeah.
I have a 249 Commodores and a 37 Terraplane.
That's great.
We
have
also restore antique cars and motorcycles, and there's actually a lot in common because they're both electromechanical. It's, you know, it's steel and electricity, and then the addition of gasoline.
We have a great comment from Robert Gell here, who says, Dydia and Paul's new book is indeed a treasure to have in your library, tremendous resource and enlightening experience. So the best way to get it is through your website, right? It can be ordered through that website.
Yes, I'll type it into the chat again.
Yeah, okay, that's great, because I think a lot of people are going to want to
Yeah,
get that.
Museum of Neon Art sells it. And
Yeah,
some bookstores sell it.
historyofneon.org. We sell it, and I'll put in Mona's website.
Now, that's the end of the chat questions, but we have a
Great.
whole bunch of people still online. Does anybody have a question they'd like to just ask off the cuff? Please unmute yourself and let's have a discussion, or any comments, anything at all. Just go right ahead. I see we have Al Barna is here. Al, welcome. And your name, sorry, there's something happened with the email invites, so you missed the first part of it, but your name certainly got mentioned at the beginning part of the presentation. Is there anything you wanted to say? No?
Putting them on the spot.
Yeah, I just thought he might want to say something, or maybe he's gone away, but he's still on the list. Anyways, anybody else with a question for Paul or Dydia? Oh,
Brian,
There
there
you
was
are.
one here, Cindy asked if they have any apprentices now.
no, we covered that one, Michael, and Paul said that they have somebody that they are training, not formally, but informally training this person. Anything else, Michael? Oh, okay.
One of the things that, you know, so Paul doesn't bend the letters. He's not a neon bender himself, but that's only part of what the trade is about. So making the sign cabinet or can, and installing the sign, knowing how to hang it on the wall, right? This is not simple when they're very large, very heavy, and very high up on the building.
Yeah.
So those are also things that are done informally through apprenticeships. So Paul typically needs more than two hands to do anything that he's doing. So he most often has one other person working with him and learning how to do those things.
I just did a sign in Pasadena recently, 30-foot long sign from probably about 1926, something like that. And I didn't take it down. The people that took it down threw away all the bracketry, and there were no holes in it. So it was like it just magically hung in the air. There was no attachment points, and I could not figure it out. And one day I was driving around my neighborhood and I saw where 1930s neon sign had been taken down, and they had special hooks that they made that cradled the sign. And I went, there's the answer. But I would have never known. And I did not want to start drilling holes in the damn thing.
Oh, you know what? Isn't this interesting? We have a question from Karen, and I was going to ask the exact same question myself, but I was kind of afraid to ask because I was distracted for a while, and I was wondering whether you'd already covered it in your presentation. But the question is, how did you get interested in neon signs, and how did you learn to work with them?
Good parties. So back in the mid 70s, there was a neon shop, a guy named Charles DeBona on in kind of like East Hollywood area. And he used to have good parties, and I'd hang out at the shop a little bit, and I got real fascinated by it. And I was always interested in old stuff. And to me, neon was old stuff. And I was making jewelry at the time. And one of the places I made jewelry for didn't have a sign. And they said, you know, you make good jewelry. Can you make us a sign? So I went, yeah, why not? I didn't know any better. So I think it was mentioned earlier, I cast up this big resin, like 8-foot long resin guitar with a broken neck and neon strings that were kind of flailing around like a kind of an homage to Pete Townsend and the Who. And then it had the name of the clothing store on the front. And it doesn't sound like much today, but you know, back then it was like, oh man, people were going, did you see that sign on Sunset Strip? And I'd go, yeah, I made it. And they go, yeah, bullshit. But that's how I got into it. Then people started asking me. I did probably the bulk of the signs on Melrose, which is kind of like the punk rock hipster place back in the late 70s. So.
Okay. Now we're getting a whole bunch of.
I got interested.
Yes, go ahead, of course.
So I got interested in neon because I got interested in Paul, and he was working on neon signs when we were first going out. And then it was years later, I thought, wow, you know, there's something going on here. I should write an article about this or something like that, since I'm a scholar. And so then I went and I thought, okay, well, I need to do some background reading. So I'll look for the big fat book about neon's history. I'm sure the library has it. And they didn't. And the Library of Congress didn't have it. And I went, what? And so we looked and looked and looked, and there wasn't a book. So then we decided to embark on this research together and wrote this little book that's available now. And this year we're also working on the big fat scholarly book about neon.
Wow, that's interesting. Love me, love my neon signs, I guess, is a part of it, right?
I pay her.
We've got a bunch of questions now, actually. Jeremy, who's well-versed in neon himself, what do you think is the biggest threat to neon signs in the wild today? I like that saying, sign codes, neglect, development pressures, etc.
Well, the biggest threat to neon is that for the last 25 years, LEDs have been trying to outdo neon at their own game. And they've been pretty successful with kind of the disinformation campaign that LEDs are cheaper, LEDs are easier. LEDs are kind of crap, but a lot of people buy them. And a lot of people are very happy to settle.
They're certainly not going to last 95 years.
No.
They don't last 95 months. They don't last 95 days in many cases.
Yeah, I was at a friend's shop and they were making an LED Acura sign for a dealer. And they're going, yeah, look at this stuff. It looks just like neon. I went, no, it doesn't. They go, well, actually it doesn't. But it kind of looks really close.
But it's close.
Yeah.
So they're still trying to imitate. So that's definitely a threat. But what we've seen happen in the last 10 or 15 years is that it's neon is up off the bottom. So it doesn't look like it's going to go extinct. I would have, we were concerned that it would at one time. But knowing businesses are starting to decide in favor of neon and choose neon for their signs. That's mostly happening in larger metropolitan areas like Los Angeles, New York, the bigger cities. But also it's people like the SCA, and the Route 66 associations and people who come to Neon Speaks, and it's people who care who are saving signs in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and on their highways. It's people who reach out and preserve signs. That's also work for sign shops, and that's preserving our neon heritage in really, really important ways. So that's so that's also been a really big change. The American Sign Museum has a portion of their website called SOS, not for scrap old signs, but for save old signs. And they there archive all the news stories, newspaper articles that come out about sign preservation and sign restoration projects around the country. And you can see that they're happening absolutely everywhere. Same thing is true for neon museums and outdoor displays of neon signs. They're popping up all around the country everywhere.
Oh, that's wonderful. Julie Taylor has a question. Julie, can you unmute, please, and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks. This was great. On the Castle Argyle, I know that the building is going through an entire restoration and seismic and all of that.
Yeah.
Are there any seismic concerns with that have to go into the signage?
By default, yes. So as an example, what you're saying is the people that are rebuilding the building tore down the columns that were holding that archway sign up because they've been compromised. So they demoed those and they poured new concrete, and that's why I'm waiting with the thing in the backyard until they're ready.
So the sign itself doesn't have seismic issues. Had it been rotten with a rotten bottom like that rotten letter O, if a lot of times signs rot out on the bottom, and that's because water goes downhill.
Also,
but
pigeons
also
get in them, and there's pigeon shit.
So when the access panels are left open, birds, especially pigeons, like to fly in and they make their nests in there, and then they poop and pee in there, and that's acidic and it mixes with the water. And then when they're nesting in there, they snuggle up to the neon and they get electrocuted in there and they make a bigger mess. So you can find signs that are piled feet high with dead pigeons in their nests.
I took three 50-gallon trash can bags out of a sign that was only about 5 feet tall. It was
Oh my God.
full of detritus, almost up to the top.
Ex-pigeons. So
This is
that
on top of the building, because in LA we've got so many that are on top.
Right.
So my point is that accelerates the decay. And then if you have the old corn coil transformers that are very heavy, those are typically in the bottom of the sign. And so if the bottom is really rotted out, you could get the transformer dropping out the bottom.
Yeah, but I think the answer to her question is that no, there is no seismic, but the city does not allow those big rooftop signs anymore. There's only one that's gone up in the last 60 years that I know of, and they got special dispensation to do it.
Really?
The
Okay.
the Californian one, we also got a special dispensation to do it. They had to make change the rules.
We have two more questions, and I think we're actually running a little over. It's just past 9 o'clock. So let's take these two questions, and then unless there's some more, we'll say goodnight. So Stephanie asked, again, I'm wondering if there's a database or archive of neon signs. These are special. They need to be preserved. Hopefully somebody's keeping track of them.
Oh, there is.
Oh, and it's a 3-word answer, and Randall and Al at SF Neon have already typed the website, and the 3-word answer is Deborah Jane Seltzer. She is the living archive and encyclopedia of all neon signs across the country, and she has logged them all in her monumental website. You can search by type of sign like barbecue or beer, or you can search by state and then by town among the states. It's mind-boggling, and she drives thousands and thousands of miles each year in order to update this living catalog and note down which signs have been destroyed, which signs have been restored. She's truly amazing, and she's just such a gem of our community.
Yeah, she's not on the broadcast tonight, but she did register for it. I know she often gets distracted by her work, and so I know she will watch this in the next day or two, and I'm sure will be quite pleased with the reference. Actually, two quick more ones. It's an interesting one. Dean says, I used to live down the street from the Smithereens Pest Control sign. Isn't that one of the oldest in the country? What happened to it?
Don't know that one, and I don't know where Dean lives, so that makes it hard.
Well, Dean's on the line. Maybe he could unmute Dean. Press your unmute button and maybe tell us a little bit about it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in the Chicago area. The sign was, I believe, in Franklin Park on Grand Avenue. And the story is how it's been that it was the oldest neon sign in the United States. It's a very simple sign. It's got an outline of a raft with the word Smithereens on top. And I know in the last years they had covered it in plexiglass so it wouldn't get damaged. And then all of a sudden it was gone. And I'm just curious, since it is supposed to be the oldest. And I've talked to other neon artists and they've said, yeah, from what we understand, that is supposed to be one of the oldest in the whole country. It was right down the block from here on Grand Avenue.
It could certainly be one of the oldest, but all the research that we've done points to, well, of course, the oldest luminous tube signs in the US were Daniel McFarland Moore in the New York City metropolitan area, Newark area in the 1890s. So that's much older. There's none of those extant. So that's much, much older, but the contemporary.
Also the, whatchamacallit, the neon.
The Ingersoll sign, there were multiple. 1909, 1904 at the St. Louis Expo. So there were different experimental signs, 1904, 1905, 1909. But the contemporary style neon signs that we all think of now, those really date from the mid 1920s in the United States. Yeah. And all the research that we've done shows that the first ones popped up originally in New York City. No, probably it was a sign that said Overland. There are no surviving photographs of it. Even Tom Rinaldi, who's the expert on New York City neon, we've talked with him about this for years, and no one's been able to show which one really was the oldest. But there's no evidence that Chicago was the oldest. With that said, Chicago probably got a George Claude franchise in the very early years. So that could be a sign from like 1926, which would make it, if it's still extant, one of the oldest handful of signs that are remaining in the country.
Also, we found...
It was supposed to be from the 1920s, what we were told. Yeah. And like I said, I've actually talked to some SCA neon people, and I don't remember their names, but they knew about the sign. And they said, yeah, that, from what we understand, was it. So if you guys get a chance, research it and find out.
Yeah, we'll look it up.
Check it out. There's also a photograph from 1924 of what could possibly be a neon sign in San Francisco, and it's at Earl C. Anthony's dealership.
Right, so it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
used cars.
We actually think, I can share my screen and show you this photograph. We actually think that though the mythology about the Earl C. Anthony sign in Los Angeles that's a myth, that's not true.
Just this one.
That's what I'm doing.
Oh, okay.
This photograph of Earl C. Anthony's headquarters in San Francisco, the photograph is not dated itself, but we can tell by dating the automobile license plates that this is 1924.
And spring.
And it's springtime with windows open. We can see here there are three signs. The one on the top says Overland. You can't see that right here, but if you flip it, you can read it. But there are two electric signs here. I'll go to the next slide. You can see them here on the right. There's conduit running to them. And then you can see that if these were light bulb signs, there's no way to service the bulbs.
Yeah.
You can't get in there. So,
and also the cans aren't really deep enough for a bulb and a socket.
So our theory, really Paul's theory, is that these were early neon signs. They may indeed have been the supposed signs that Earl C. Anthony imported from France, made by Claude Neon in France, and they may have gone up as early as 1923, just not according to the myth in Los Angeles, but actually in San Francisco. We haven't been able to find any other photographs of Earl C. Anthony's car dealership in San Francisco at this time, only this one. We'd love to know more about it because this is so tantalizing. It shows glass obscuring what might be the tubing. There's some evidence that early Georges Claude signs in France also did that. Not how we think of neon now, but that doesn't mean that they didn't do it when neon was really young. So who knows, if maybe one of you folks out there can help us and find out more about Earl C. Anthony in San Francisco.
And that's a Packard Overland dealership?
Yes.
Right, he
Well,
represented both.
Because Overland became Pontiac eventually.
No,
Didn't it?
no, Overland's Willie's. Willie's Overland.
Willie's
Oh,
Night-
you're right, Willie's. You're right.
Yeah,
You're
you're
right.
thinking of,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Pontiac is GM.
no, but there was another company, the Pontiac was the junior
Yeah,
partner.
I forget the name. I should know it. I forgot the name. You're right. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I should know it too.
Our last question of the
Yeah.
night, and we're over time already, but thanks so much for spending some extra time with us. We have a question that says, first of all, somebody asked, Lee Bracken asked, where can the neon list be found? So I've just sent Deborah Jane's website out across the chat. So everybody can see that website address and they can go there and they'll find out everything that Deborah Jane knows. The last question is, why are rooftop signs banned?
That's
Yes.
really part of that landscape morality that I talked about so briefly, where so many signs had been accruing in the landscape as a palimpsest, layer upon layer upon layer of different kinds of signs. You still had really old, painted signs on the mounted to the face of the building. You still had early electric signs, light bulb signs. You had early neon signs, newer neon signs. You had fluorescent tube signs. You had billboards, and they were all so cluttered and so random, and so many of them that became a significant object of disdain.
But also, rooftop signs are, they can get blown by the wind. They're a little bit of an attractive nuisance. I actually had an improperly installed rooftop sign almost collapse on the street while I was on it. It kind of went like boom, like that.
Oh
I
my
was
God.
at the tip of it. So if they're not done right, they're dangerous.
Right. There was always a lot of engineering that went into them. And then, of course, you have to wonder, okay, so maybe it was really done well when it was new. How about 75 years later? Right. So there have been there's not a lot of news stories about neon signs unless they fail spectacularly. So when a big rooftop sign comes crashing down, it always makes the papers. So it does happen.
Yes, no question. Well, we're well past our scheduled time, Dydia and Paul. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the SCA and all of our viewers tonight for an excellent presentation. Most interesting, absolutely fascinating. And as I said, this has been recorded. We'll send you a recording of it. I'll send you all the chat as well, and it will be posted on the SCA's website, usually within a day. And I know right now that there'll be many, many, many more people will watch it through that avenue that couldn't make it tonight. So thank you again. And your membership in the SCA has been extended for another year as a little gift, a token of our gratitude.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And keep them lit.
Oh, yeah. That thing is great. That's what I want for Christmas next year. So, and again, to all of our viewers, SCA members tonight, thank you for joining us and spending an hour with Dydia and Paul. And we look forward to next month, which the date escapes me, but we have Brian Butko is making a presentation about all the various books that he's authored. So that should be a fun presentation as well.
I put it in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat. Okay, great. And
February 9th.
you'll be getting an email from our webmaster. Oh, sorry, it's February the 9th, is it, Michael?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You'll be getting an email anyways. Everybody gets the email asking you to sign up if you're interested. And so you'll hear all about it. But join us for that one, number 26. And hopefully, Dydia and Paul, you can join us for that one too. Should be very
Would
interesting.
love to. Thank you so much for having us. And it's such a thrill to speak with this group because we're a part of you and we appreciate everything that the SCA has done and is doing. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night.